So we left off at the moment, where Francis comes back to Assisi from Spoleto, from his journey to gain and to become a knight. And of course, as we were saying, because he didn't have noble blood, he had to come as a knight with the valour that he did, with the deeds that he did that would gain him recognition. And so, and then he would be made a knight. So yeah, and then that would, he had the support of his father, his family, of course he had the support of the town, and the young men of Assisi. One thing I just want to say, I don't know whether you know, but as you grew up, you might be one of them. But, if you've got a group, if you're a young man or a young woman, there's a group that you went to school with, that you hang out with afterwards. And there was that one person that just brought it all together, When he entered the room, everybody wanted to talk with him, everyone to get to know him. That was what Francis was like. I was lucky enough when I first joined, I was sent to Italy to learn Italian. That didn't work really well. But what it is one of the things I prayed about is when I joined the order that I wouldn't visit Assisi as a tourist. I prayed that I would live there. So I was 3 months I lived in Assisi learning Italian. And the thing is, I walked in those 3 months every street. I got to know and so I got to know where Francis lived. And my sub-prayer of that was I would get to know Francis of Assisi, personally, his character, what sort of a person he was. And when in the friary where I lived, they had a youth group that used to come. And it wasn't until I got home I realised I didn't know Francis here, but I got to know Francis before his conversion. I got to know, because I didn't grow up in an Italian environment. I grew up in Anglo-Celt, WASP territory, white Anglo-Saxon, even though I was Catholic. But, I grew up with that reality. The first time I ever had Chinese food was I was 17, and the only spaghetti we ever ate was from a can produced by but most Italians would. Anyway, so yeah, I remember I was 18 or 19 before I actually had real spaghetti or pasta. So I live in the transition time, but we all know those type of guys, but I just got to know that Italian personality, that Francis would have been. He just would have had a magnetic personality. And the thing is, what you've got to realise that what I'm trying to say is that everything moved around that. His father used that. The young men of the town used it. They saw him as an influencer. He was an influencer of his time. And that's what, to understand it, we've got to get what we know and recognise it and put it back in there so we can actually get to know him, not just as an historical figure looking back, but the personality of what he was and who he is, so that actually it can speak to us more clearly, it's more concrete, and that's what you always need to do. And this is a little aside, but that's what mental prayer is. Many people think, oh, my father told me, how do I do mental prayer? Well, use your imagination. Start with wonder. What does Jesus say? Mark's Gospel. You will never enter the kingdom of heaven unless you change and become like a little child. Is Jesus banning us from heaven? Of course. Of course he is. No, I'm only joking. That's got your attention. It's the opposite. He's giving us the key. He's showing us the door. He's opening it for us. What is it that little kids have that we sometimes lose as adults? Why does everybody say that first? There's another talk on that. And that involves Freud and other psychologists. No, sorry. It seems to be the first thing. But it's not. Because I've been a priest for a long time, and actually I think, now it's not in this church, but other churches where I've had baptisms, and it's kind of, they've got all the cousins. One day they had all his cousins sitting, and they're all under 10 years old. I think they're even lower. Yeah, I trust. What you're saying is correct. It's not wrong. It's also not right. No, it's not the exact word that I'm after. Curiosity. When Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you will never... What does he mean? What do we have to gain? Humility. Yes. Imagination. Yes, you're getting really hot.
Wonder and awe.
Wonder. Wonder. You have nephews and nieces and grandchildren and everything like that. Go for a walk with them in the park. You come across a puddle and you think, oh, it's a puddle. You know, what do they see?
They see a
possibility. There's an ocean there. There might be fish there. Perhaps they're tadpoles. When I was a boy, that was our big thing. We'd go tadpole hunting. And we had a house in Kadina that had a cellar, and every winter the water table would rise and would fill up with water, so we put tadpoles in the water. One Sunday lunch, we were all sitting there after Mass having our roast lamb, and frogs started croaking in the cellar. So the thing is, what it is that wonder. And that's really the next step for Francis. His focus was to become rich and famous, to become loved. He already was, that's what I'm saying. This wheel was turning around to him and his personality. And if you read Celano, first Celano, even though he's talking about all the bad things that he did, which he probably did, he's saying even in that was the seed of what God moved and changed. And that's why, like St. Paul, for example, St. Paul was out and he was a focused person. He was going to destroy these Christians because they were destroying and they were a threat to his faith. And he wasn't just a Jew, he knew his faith. He studied with the best men of his time. And he was a scribe. And he knew his faith. And he was out. And he was determined. And he was focused. And what did God do with that focus? That determination? He knocked him off his horse. Still today, we have that saying in English. It's probably in Italian. Cabello, cadente, or something like that. But he knocked him off his horse. But he didn't demolish the focus. He changed the focus 180 degrees. This man that was trying to kill the church, to destroy people, to destroy this new sect, becomes the very person that spreads it across the empire. And he says in the end, his last letters, I preached to the whole world. Well, quite literally, in his time, he has. This is what God does, and this is what God did to Francis. He didn't wipe that, and that's what a lot of the times when we are looking for change of heart, we're trying to bulldoze what was there before. But there we rob the cross of its power. What's the power of the cross?
Transformation.
Yeah, why?
Lots of less.
Yeah. What was the end result of that? We never saw him again. They buried him. You got the ring right. What happened 3 days after? Resurrection.
Yeah.
The power over death. That sign, that image, is the death of death. And what he does is he transforms. That's correct. The resurrection transforms. The 51st Psalm, what does it say? For us, the 51st Psalm is a psalm that you say, it's the first psalm you say every Friday. There's a great line in there. Create. Who's doing the work? Yes, not us. God is the one that creates the new heart. Put a pure heart within me. Wash me and I will be. Who's doing the action? God. And we live in basically, well, we live in a secular country. Australia was founded as a secular country. The colony was here, well not the colony, the convicts were here for 5 years before they thought about building a church. There was a Spanish ship came and they landed in where Sydney is now. They were astounded. You mean you've been here for 5 years and you haven't even thought about building a church? We would live in tents out in the open. The first thing we would do is build a church. You know, whatever hobby you have, restoring old cars, gardening. That's good. That's wonderful for you to do, but don't make everybody else do it. That's what I was saying to Father Janice this morning when we get the guys from India, and also you would have discovered if you remember coming to Australia, if you remember coming to the churches in Australia, what did you feel? Is this really Catholic? And the same with the guys that come from India. Is this really? This is different because this is not a typical Australian church. They don't have the parade of saints. When I first went into our church in Hawthorne, that was built by the Italians, what happened to my Anglo-Celt sensitivity? This is ridiculous. It's overdone. How can I ever pray in here? Because I was used to the plain, simple church, which is what? It's the product of post-Reformation. It's the product of Henry VIII. And it's the product of 300 years of living in a country, in a kingdom, where the Catholic Mass is considered an act of treason. To celebrate Catholic Mass was considered an act of treason. One of my patron saints, Robert Southern, who was a Jesuit and a poet, was hung, drawn and quartered. That was the sentence. If you want, I can tell you at lunchtime, just after we've started our food, what it involves. Yes, it's beautiful. Now the thing is, I go to our church in Hawthorne, which is, you can walk in and the first thing you think, this was built by homesick Italians. Because it's not a reproduction, it's a reproduction of everything they love. And so it is over the top, because it's everything in one. So But it's beautiful in the sense that you're never alone. You don't feel alone in the church. And that's what it is. It's amazing. But in the church of Hawthorne, you've got the saints at the top looking as well. And you realise that, no, I'm not coming here to pray personally. I come here to pray personally. But the image that you're never alone in the church. And if you sit in that church, what can I pray about? Well, open your eyes and look around. Now see, the thing is, that's the difference between the Reformation never hit Italy. And that mentality, that Protestant mentality that focuses on ourselves, never penetrated. And that's why the Catholics that are coming are a gift to Australia and are nourishing and strengthening Australia's culture. Please tell that to our present Prime Minister. It is. When I celebrate Mass, and I do a lot of Masses around, one of the calls is in the current state in Australia, in the way we are, is this cohesion of society. Even though we are a diversity, how does this cohesion happen? Well, I was in the church the other day. There would have been 50 different nationalities in front of me while I was saying Mass. And they were all mixed together. There weren't people shouting at each other, giving racist comments, or any other level. They were all focused on one thing, on the Father. And the thing is that one Father unites us all. And this is how Francis can speak to us today. So Francis is praying, as I said, and he hears these words, rebuild my church. As you can see, it's falling into ruin. The word church is, if you go back into the Greek, it simply means called. Those who are called. Ecclesia. What's the Italian word for shout? To shout out. To call someone. Oh yeah. In Latin, who knows Latin? Clamavi. Yeah. In the sense, so it means to call out to you. That you're called to be part of something. And in the very first paragraph in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, sorry, if I was 30 years younger, this would have happened instantly. It's this, paragraph 1 in the Catechism. God, infinitely perfect and blessed in himself, in a plan of sheer goodness, freely created man to make him share in his own blessed life. I invite you to memorize that. If you wake up in the morning and as you come into consciousness, which for some of us takes an hour and a half, and you remember that the reason why you have breath, the reason why you're alive, is only one reason, that you share in God's life. That's enough, but it doesn't end there. For this reason, at every time and in every place, God draws close to man. He calls him, seeks him, to know him, to love him with all his strength. And he calls together all men, scattered and divided by sin, into the unity of his family. What's his family called? The church. You've got it there, right? The church is simply those who are called to be part of the family of God. How do you become part of the family of God? Here. in baptism. When I baptise a little baby, I say to the parents, if you become the richest people and parents on this earth, you will not be able to give your child a greater gift than what you're giving to them now. To be brought into the family of God. And to be part of a family. What makes a family? What makes you part of a family? You share the blood of your mother and father. You know, they're two people met after the war, got married on the 3rd of December 1945. Two people. 45. Now there's 32 directly from those two. So that meeting has been quite fruitful and it's still going. The church is the family of God. And the thing is, that's why when Francis is asked by Jesus, look, my house is falling into ruin. Go and rebuild it. Francis starts primarily first with actually rebuilding it brick by brick. But in the journey, he discovers the Lord is asking him to build the house. There's a story of someone met this family, they were refugees, and they said, you know, we need to find you a home. And the father said, no, we have the home, we just need the house to live in. There's another one where there was this man, his wife had died, and he had a little 3-year-old boy that he'd lost his job. And for about 5 years they lived on the street where he scraped enough together. He eventually did night school. He became, in the end, a very famous lawyer in the United States. And they interviewed him on one of these shows. And the boy was there. He was, by this time, 25. And they asked him, what was it like to live on the street? He said, I didn't know I was living on the street because my father was with me. And for the first time in all of the history of humanity, an interviewer had nothing to say. Because he'd said, look. And so that's why Francis moves. He gradually becomes to understand what the church is, this physical building. It's the family of God. And the thing is, what shifts him is he gradually, and he takes cloth from his father's shop, and he goes to Spoleto. A lot of things happen in Spoleto. And he loads it up on the horse and he sells the cloth, he sells the horse. Which would be today, like you take your dad's car and you fill it up and you not only sell the stuff, here's whatever his business is, you sell the car, And so he gives it for money to have a light and the oil on the cross in Little San Damiano. The priest, of course, was wise, and he knew Francis's father. He chucked the money on a windowsill, and it stayed there. Of course, when Francis's father discovered he had done this, he gets angry and demands justice. So he takes him to the mayor, and the mayor asks, why did you do this? And he said, because I want to do it, to help the church. And the mayor said, oh, this is great. It's nothing to do with me. Go to the bishop. So he goes to the bishop, and the Capuchins have a church now where Carlo Cutis is, right in the piazza where the bishop lived. And so he goes to the bishop, and the bishop said, why did you do it? Well, I wanted to give money, and I wanted to help the church, And his father demands, so he just said, okay, I'll give you back. Okay, I'll give you back everything. He takes all his clothes off in front of everybody, gives them back to his father. He lets go. And so in order to embrace. And so that's the next step for him of discovering that God is Father of all humanity, of that called, those called into the family of God. And so it's his, in a sense, he wasn't thinking about it at the time, but he reflects later. It's a step where he's born into the deeper reality, and that's what happens here. We're all born into a family, and we're alive, and we get the blood from our mother and father, especially from our mother, you know, through the umbilical cord. When we're born, we're alive, and we share that blood of the family and the genes of both our mother and father. We are part, concretely, physically part of a family. But that family brings you to the font, and you're born again into the life of the church. And you have within you. That's why you've got to imagine, you know, the picture of the Adam and Eve. Adam, the creation of Adam. Those two hands. Imagine it in your head. Have you got the picture? Are the hands together? No, there's a gap. And Michelangelo, 500 years ago, he laid on his back painting this, 500 years. In 2015, it was 500 years. He posed this question that will last until the end of time. Even if that church collapses, we will still have the picture, and there will be still the question, why? Why aren't they grasped? What's going to happen when they meet? Have you ever thought about that? Well, go and think about it, because I'm not going to tell you the answer. The answer is here, and the answer is with every single sacrament that we have. What's God's hand look like? It's reaching out. It's every ounce. And if you look at the painting, everything to do with God is dynamic. Even the material is flowing so that there's an energy. What's on the other side? There's Adam in this relaxed position with a hand, and even his hand is limp. But God has gone as far as he can. Because what would happen if God grabs his hand? Exactly, brilliant. This man knows what he's talking about. He would interrupt their free will. God gave us two things when he created us. First of all, he breathed his life, his life, into us. And the second is he gave us free will. In here, oh, you can hear it's empty. In here is the only barrier in this universe to God. In here and here is a door, a steel door that can come down, that can actually keep God out. And we carry it with us. In Mark's Gospel, we must read, I think it's chapter 3, 4, and 5, where he's sitting on the side of the lake, and he's talking about the kingdom of heaven is like mustard seed. It's like a sower going out to sow. It's like this, it's like that. Then at the end, as the sun sets and they all go home, he says, they're in the boat, and he says, let's go across the other side of the lake. Okay? And before I die, I want to write a book, what the apostles thought but never said. And the apostles knew, okay, we're going, the sun's setting. And there's not a lot, we haven't got a battery or a torch in the, you know, and you can't light a fire on a boat. And we're going across, it's going to be in the middle of the night. Also, the other side of the lake What lived there? When you were kids, and if you misbehaved, did your mother say, if you don't be kept good, the boogeyman will get you? Did they say, well, in Italian, it might be something else. Where does the boogeyman live for them? The other side of the lake. That was Gentile territory, it wasn't Jewish territory. They were Gentiles, they were pagans, they were, you don't know what. But in this very city, I guarantee you, there is a suburb that you'll never go to. Think of it in your head. There's a few in Sydney that I wouldn't even drive through. That's where the boogeyman lives. And do you know what? That's where Jesus was going to take them, wanted them to go. What happens? And they get on the lake. Exactly what they thought was going to happen. Who is this guy? And where is he leading us? And what? The storm comes, the waves come. Their boat was like a Viking boat that's got points at the end and on the side. Because they were fishing, they needed the side to be low. Well, the side low meant it's nearer to the water, so if the waves are high, and the thing is, they knew that if the water comes in, they can bail as much as they like, but that boat's going to go, and when it goes down, it's going to suck them with it. Despite Jack and what her name, when the Titanic goes down, swim as hard as you can. Well, that's not going to work. They were men, 4 of them were fishermen all their lives. And where is he? With his head on a pillow. Mark even says, on a pillow. There's probably one, it was laced by Peter's mother-in-law. And he gets up. They're shouting at him. We're going to drown. They weren't sort of, oh Jesus, I think you better wake up. They were screaming for their lives. He gets up, calm, fork. Who is this man? Unfortunately, they keep going to the other side. They get to the other side of the lake. And what happens? Exactly what they thought was going to happen. Depends on the gospel. But this naked, hairy man comes screaming at them. Yeah, well, this is the boogeyman! And then Jesus comes and he says, who are you? The demon says, have you come to destroy us before the time? The demon knows who he is. What is your name? My name is Legion because there are many of us. Legion is a division of the Roman army. How many men in a legion? 6,000. This is evil beyond anything we can cope with. Begone, Jesus. No, begone, devil. We can't cope with that. We can't cope with the storm and the wind because it will suck us into death immediately. We can't cope with that evil. Jesus says, begone. And they go into the pigs. And the man is there, clothed, and in his right mind. They go back to the other side of the lake. And they get there, and the official says, my little girl is dying. Come. Oh, come. On the way, there's a woman that's had bleeding for 12 years. And she says, if I only touch the nethermost hem of his cloak, I know I'll be cured. She did. And Jesus turns around. Who touched me? And the apostles, again, as we would do, what do you mean? There's 100 people around here, they're all touching you. He knew the power. And she comes trembling. Your faith has saved you. Doctors couldn't, they made it worse. But there's one act of faith in the man who could save her. he goes to the little girl who's already dead. All the mourners are still there. And he casts them out. They all laughed at him because he said, she's asleep, she's not dead. And he says, takes Peter, James and John, the mother and father, grabs the little girl by the hand, Talitha kum. Little girl, I tell you to get up. She gets up. In those three stories, one after the other, in sequence, Mark is showing us Jesus has power over nature, power over water, which is the symbol of chaos in our lives. He has power over evil, which we don't have a power over by ourselves. And he has power over even death itself. What's the next story? He goes to Nazareth. And they say, isn't this the carpenter's son? And he can perform no miracle. The door that closes all that power off, that we have total access to, is here. The thing that St Francis did, he opened that door. When he took his clothes off, he let go of the key of that door and opened it. Now, I can say, truly, my Father in heaven. The next step is the thing that St Francis hated most of all was lepers. They were a fact of his time. And they lived outside of the town. I don't know, you've probably never come across leprosy. In East Timor, there are sisters that look after lepers still. And we can cure it now, but they couldn't. And the fear was if you got contaminated, although they didn't really understand that in those days. So Francis grew up in a very, what we would call, upper middle class. And he liked clean, he liked comfort, he liked things nice. And so the leper was the exact opposite. What did Jesus do? What did God do? He says in his testament, which is the last thing he wrote to the friars, his will and testament, the last thing he wanted to say to them. Because the friars want to know what we all want to know. More into sweetness of soul and body. 40-something years ago, remember Father Francis Molino? Gave me a book, and in that book, I read that phrase. And I said, this is what I want. Let's go through it. The Lord granted me, Brother Francis, it's a gift. Created me a new heart. Put a new spirit in me. Wash me. The action is coming from God. The impetus is coming from God. That's all we have to do. We have to respond. And that's what Francis, the Lord granted me. It's a gift from God. To begin to do penance in this way. Penance doesn't mean he gave up meat on Fridays and he didn't eat chocolate during Lent. It's the relationship between the word penance and when I was in sin. By saying when I was in sin doesn't mean I was out sinning. I was committing sins. What it means, the word sin comes from an archery term. So you're the archer, you've got the bow, you put the arrow on the string and you aim it at the target. And the arrow misses the target. Doesn't even go near the bullseye, let alone the target. It goes off, And that poor person going by at the time. Sin was when you missed the target. So in other words, when he said, I was in sin, I wasn't in relationship with God. God was there, like most people, okay. You know, we did the census last Tuesday night. How many people wrote, I'm their actual faith? We'll find out. But, okay, yeah, God. But I had once, I was preparing someone for a baptism, and he said, yes, Father, we go to church regularly, every Christmas and every Easter. But we're not fanatics like those people that go every Sunday. I'll tell you the answer later. But the thing is, in other words, God is there, but He's on the outer. He's not in the Wolfton wet, the rhythm of your life. He's not part of it. That's what Francis meant by sin. God was not the focus, the centre of my life. I didn't pursue a relationship with God. That's what Francis means by penance. To do penance was to make God the centre and to pursue and nourish and develop a relationship with God. So, we go back. The Lord granted me, Brother Francis, to begin to do penance, to enter into this relationship, to open that door in this way. While I was in sin, it seemed bitter for me to see lepers. Because why? Sin is missing the target. The target's God. But we're aiming at another target. We've got another focus. And the focus is something that we've created. That's the centre of our world. That's what we find value with. That's whatever we value, we worship. Because it's worth, that's what it's worth. It's worth something to our life. That's what worship means. You do something that you find worthy of doing, your focus. So that's what everybody's going to ask. What's the focus? Where's the bullseye? Am I hitting the target? Or am I missing it altogether? Am I living in sin? Is God not the focus of my life? But Francis discovers that the Lord is there. The Lord granted me, He gifted me with this ability to begin to do penance, to begin to enter into relationship with Him. While I was in sin, it seemed bitter for me to see lepers. Why was it bitter for Him to see lepers? Why do you think? That's right. His focus was on Himself. And because they were nasty and smelly and stinky and dirty, that wasn't in His world. And they had to be pushed aside. But the thing is, if everybody does that, if they're only satisfying, if the centre of their life is their own satisfaction, their own ego, their own wanting to create a world where they are happy, do you think those might bounce against each other a little bit? And then do you think that that builds cohesion in society when there are 1,000 different centres? No. And so what does he say? The Lord, what I found bitter, the Lord Himself led me among them. Let's go across to the other side of the lake. What? So the Lord led him among them. Now Francis still had the choice. And I always think, how many thousand, perhaps even more, lepers did Francis avoid? Did he cross the other side of the road? Did he not go that way? Until suddenly he stopped. The Lord Himself led me among them, and then the next phrase, I had mercy upon them. I could talk for another 10 hours on what that means. Actually, one of the most beautiful expositions of it is in John Paul II's encyclical on reconciliation, and it's only a footnote. And the footnote goes through about 3 pages, but he does an explanation of what mercy is, which fills it out. Basically, it means to stand inside and see the world from someone else's point of view, which actually pulls apart that whole sense of you've created your own little world and you're centered. So what God is doing, and he said, I have mercy upon them. And then something incredible happened when he stood with them in their pain and their misery and their suffering. That which was bitter was changed into sweetness of soul and body. And then I lingered a little and left the world. And that's the completion, really, of his journey of conversion. And the complete conversion is moving the centre from here to here. Shifting that. So it's turning. That's what happened with St. Paul. And that's what the thing is. That's what Michelangelo is saying to us. You just have to lift that weak wrist and grab that hand. Because what Michelangelo is saying in that picture is that God, Adam is the creation of Adam, right? Well, isn't Adam already alive? That Adam's there, alive. He's not dead or in bits and pieces like a Frankenstein that God has to put together, or a pile of mud that he has to breathe in. Adam's already alive. So what's God going to do when those hands meet? What's he going to give Adam? He's alive, but he's going to share his life.
Yeah.
And that's what happens here to us individually. We have life from our parents, and we are that alive when we are born. But God augments that life and fills that life with his life. And that life is what? What is the main attribute of God's life? Eternal. Gee, you've got a few gold stars. His life is eternal. And that's why it resonates when Adam and Eve weren't to eat the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden. Because if you eat it, you'll surely
Die.
Okay, all of us here, don't we? We know we're going to die. In 300 years' time, none of us will be here, except those who are taking those pills. None of us will be here. We all know that we're going to die. But for Adam and Eve, it wasn't a reality. The force of death for them was much more powerful than for us. Because they knew they shared God's love. And that's the craziest thing about the temptation of the devil. If you read carefully, he's actually tempting them to grasp something, to take something that they already have. And that's what he does. He dupes you, he deceives you. Oh, that's a good name for him, the deceiver. Someone might have thought of that before. He deceives you to take something you already have and you don't recognize that you've got it. Because you're not focused. You're focused on him. And that's what happens. What happened when they ate of the fruit? One of the things that happened. What's the first thing they realized? Conscious. And what's the word we use in English? We become self-conscious.
Self-conscious.
So what happens is the target moves from there to here. And that's the genius of St Francis. In this little phrase, that's the last thing he said to us. 20 years after the event happened. It's not because he remembered 20 years back. It's because he lived that pattern, that rhythm. And I've given the talk, you know, Simon Paul Simon, he's got a song called The Rhythm of the Saints. Well, that phrase of Francis is the rhythm of the saints. It's the beat that opens up this door and allows God to come in. And he didn't remember it 20 years. He remembered it because he lived that pattern, that rhythm of relationship with God up to the last breath he had. And one of the last things he said, "You are most welcome, Sister Death." Who do you welcome into your house? Who do you welcome into your house?
Family and friends.
People that you know. How did he know Sister Death? Now, we all know Sister Death, but who is ever going to welcome her? You are most welcome, Sister Death. And that's the end of this. The Lord himself led me among them, and I had mercy upon them. Because he lived that rhythm every day. Every choice that he made in that journey kept that door open. After lunch, I'll tell you what you discover when you open this door. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world